Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me here. I pray that everyone has had a blessed week. This week, we are wrapping up our Stories That Have Changed the World series. It's really been an awesome series to go through, looking at all these different parables that Jesus has taught us and just looking at how impactful a story really is. So I was really excited to just kind of go through this because I'm one that loves stories. I love storytelling. It's something that really speaks to me. So if you did not get to check out this series, we do have all the past sermons on Facebook if you want to check them out there. We do also have them on our website. When our website is up and running, we are having some technical difficulties. It seems to be up, seems to be down. So we will keep everybody posted on exactly what's going on with that, but we are still working on that. But I know our past sermons are on the Facebook page. They're not under videos. You would have to actually scroll through the timeline there, and it will have all of our different sermons and announcements and things like that that are going on. So I would urge you and encourage you, please check out the Stories That Changed the World series. It's something that really has been close and near and dear to my heart because, like I said, stories are something that are so big part of my life, and I would just love to have you share that and to really just get that into your heart there as well. But over the last few weeks, we've looked at what the power of a story really comes down to. And when it comes down to remembering things in this life, it seems that we can recount a really good story much easier than we can just some information. So some of my favorite stories that I can remember are actually very, very old stories. And they're actually called the Brothers Grimm's Tales. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the Brothers Grimm's Tales, but it's something that was actually created by these two brothers who lived in Germany in the early 1800s. And they took all of these folk tales and all these stories that were passed down from generations, and they made a book where they actually collected all of these different stories and folk tales that have been just all around the world. And so that way they could have them all in one spot and that you could really hear them, read them. And that's really what made them all widespread and known. And the thing is, you may be saying to yourself, well, I have actually never heard of the Brothers Grimm, but you're actually going to be a little shocked to hear which stories you know from their collection of folk tales and stories. So some of the more well-known stories are Sleeping Beauty. You have Snow White, Rumpelstiltskin, the Little Red Riding Hood, the Three Little Pigs, Rapunzel, Hansel and Gretel. Like this, it just goes on and on. Like that's just to name a few of the stories that they have actually put together. And that's the reason that they really are still all widespread and known today, is because of these Brothers Grimm that took all these folk tales and stories. And it's insane to think that these stories that have been told for generation to generation were all collected together over 200 years ago in a book, and yet we are still recounting these stories. And I would say actually most people have heard at least one of those stories, if not all of these stories that have actually happened. And what happens is these stories have been changing just a little bit by little bit because, you get like Disney that comes in and takes these stories and makes a movie out of it. And so you're like, oh, I do know that story. That's one of my favorite Disney movies. Well, there actually was being told beforehand by the Brothers Grimm, which actually then was being told before then by the generations of people that have passed it down from one person to another. But one thing about all of these folktales is that they all teach a lesson or a story. The whole original point of the folktale or the story was to really teach children what to do in certain situations. So you have Little Red Riding Hood, right? So she is actually being warned against talking to strangers. That is the whole point, that you shouldn't talk to strangers. Go to grandmother's house and make sure you just go straight there, because they seem nice. They may seem to have your best interest at heart, but the thing is, they really don't. And so they tell us that what we need to really do is make sure that we're not just trusting everybody that we run into along the way, that we should go on our way, especially children, don't talk to strangers. But then you have the Three Little Pigs, where they told us how hard work pays off. So you have your Three Little Pigs. You got one that built it out of straw, one that built it out of sticks, one that built it out of the bricks or stone or whatever you've heard from that story. It's all about how much work you put into it. But two of the pigs wanted to just play, and so the big bad wolf comes and blows down the house. And so the thing is, we are told that if we're not prepared, that disaster can happen, that people can come and just knock down everything that you built, that you have to have a strong foundation. Well, then maybe you have like Rapunzel, Rapunzel teaches us not just that we can all grow long hair. That's not what that is. It's actually just to not trust others exactly for what they say. Because the whole point of Rapunzel was she was locked up in a tower and she was told that the world is evil and you can't go out there and it's bad for you and I'm looking out for your best interest. But when it comes out, she ends up leaving the tower there. And what happens is she sees this whole world that exists that she was lied to about, that there was something more. And the thing is, it's teaching us that we need to find out things for ourselves. Don't just really just trust what everybody's telling you, but you need to go out there and find out what the truth really is. And it's really interesting because all of these great lessons that we have here, they seem to have warnings about what we should be doing and what will happen if we disobey. And a lot of those stories can really reflect what's being said in the Bible there, that you need to have a strong foundation. You have a strong foundation in God. You can't build it on things of this world or it will just crumble. It's going to take a lot of time and effort to really build that strong foundation so you just don't crumble. Or, really just reading the word for yourself, not just trusting what others preach and teach to you, but what you can really read and find out and just live that life for God yourself. It's the same reflection in those stories as it is in the Bible here. Well, today's story is one that Jesus taught that is ultimately a warning. It's a warning that he is telling us. So when Jesus was preaching to people, he loved to tell them in parables, and parables are just stories that teach a moral or a spiritual lesson. So we're going to dive in today into one of the parables that Jesus teaches to his closest followers there. And this week, we're going to be reading out of Matthew 18, 21 through 35. Here at Buckeye, we read out of the NIV. So if you need a Bible, please contact us. We will always give you a Bible for free. We want to make sure that you're diving into this for yourself, that you're not just believing whatever we're saying, but we're giving you the Word of God right here, right now for free. Take it. Just let us know that you need one. But we're going to be reading out of Matthew 18, 21 through 35, as I said before, and we're going to read through the whole thing, and then we're going to go ahead and discuss it afterwards. So 18, 21 through 35, it says, "Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, 'Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times?' Jesus answered, 'I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had to be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. 'Be patient with me,' he begged, 'and I will pay you back everything.' The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. 'Pay back what you owe me,' he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, 'Be patient with me, and I will pay it back.' But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay that debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. 'You wicked servant,' he said. 'I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?' In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart." So here we start off with one of the followers of Jesus, that's Peter, and he's asking Jesus a question. Right before this, if you were to go back a little bit further in the text, we see that Jesus was actually talking about dealing with sin in the church. So people that have wronged you in the church and those that are in the church that are doing things that you know are wrong. But naturally, Peter flat out asked then after that, well, how many times should we forgive somebody then? And he says, 7 times? Is that how many times we should forgive? And at first glance, you may think, wow, 7. Ooh, what a number, Peter. You're so forgiving. You're willing to really forgive someone 7 times. And we think, you know what, that's kind of low, isn't it? If you really think about 7 times, that's not very many times to forgive somebody. But you need to think about it this way. So the same person in your life screws up, and he hurts you the same way again and again and again. Let's be honest, by the 7th time, I think we're going to have some trust issues with that person. 7 is enough times where we may even be asking, can this person ever really change? They're doing the same mistake, or they're doing something over and over again where they just keep hurting us and they keep screwing up. So how many times am I supposed to forgive them, God? Well, Jesus answers with 77 times, or in some translations, it's 70 times 7. But it's not the actual number here. So it's not that we need to keep count and be like, okay, well, they screwed up this time, so I'm allowed to forgive them 77 times or 7 times 70 times, so I need to start keeping this here. It's actually supposed to be a number that is almost insurmountable to count. I can't imagine trying to keep tabs of somebody that has hurt me for the 490th time, or even for the 77th time that I'm keeping that log there. He's telling us that it's a number that doesn't even exist, that we need to make sure it's forever, that we keep forgiving. And Jesus wanted to make it very clear here to Peter, so he teaches a lesson to him through a parable. So we see that we have a servant who has to answer to a king about all that he owed. And when the time came, he was given a number. 10,000 bags of gold is what this servant owed to the king. Or 10,000 talents. So a bag of gold or a talent is actually worth 20 years of a day laborer's salary. So one bag is worth 20 years of a day laborer's salary. So if you do the math, that is 200,000 years worth of pay. Oh my goodness. That is a number that is impossible. Yeah, let me go ahead and start getting right on that. Why don't I start chipping away at that debt? It's impossible. 200,000 years of debt. So because the servant had owed so much, the king ordered that his wife, his children, literally everything that he had to his name was to be sold off to pay back this debt. Well, verse 26 says that the servant fell to his knees and he pleaded, please be patient with me. I'm going to pay back everything. I will pay you back everything that I owe you. And at this, the master then took pity on him and canceled his debt and let him go. So if we look at the servant here, he knows what he owes. It may not be the exact number that he knows what he owes, but he knows that he owes an insurmountable amount before he even walks into that door. Before they really give him that number, he has to know that he owes a ridiculous amount. But the thing is, before he goes before the king, he seems to walk around with no care. It's only at that moment when the master comes to collect. He says, everything you owe right now is so much that we need to be selling off everything you have to repay the debt. And at that moment, that's when he just falls to his knees. That's when he's like, oh my goodness, he's actually coming to collect. I didn't know he was actually going to want something from me. This is insane. So he falls to his knees. And it's interesting because he really sees now how serious this is. So he begs with the master, be patient with me. And then he says something really silly. I'm going to pay it back. I swear, I'll give you every penny. I'll try to pay you back all 200,000 years worth of pay that I owe you. Come on now. He can never pay it all back. He could have multiple lifetimes and he could never pay it back. It's impossible for him to do really anything to actually pay back a portion of what he owes. So at this, the king takes pity on him and freely forgives him of his debt. This is us with God. We all have an insurmountable amount that we owe God. You can never pay him back. But for those that are followers of Christ, we really do get this aha moment where we realize that we need this forgiveness from our King, our Lord, our Master. And we fall to our knees and we say, I realize how much I owe you. I know it's so much. And I will do everything that I can to repay you. And so we really just fall to our knees. And God takes pity on us. We say that I know I'm a lowly sinner and I know that I owe you so much, God. And God then says, I forgive you of your debt. He says, I'm going to cancel it. When we accept Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior, when we accept his Son for what he's done for us, he wipes that debt clean for us. That's amazing to think about, that I have 200,000 years worth of debt that he's going to pay off for me. But just like in the servant here, we seem to forget what God has done for us. In verse 28, we see the servant leave the presence of his master and find someone who owes him 100 silver coin. This is a couple months worth of wage. So for a day laborer, you earn a denarii a day. He owes 100 denarii, so he owes him 100 days worth of money. But at this, it says that the servant that was forgiven of his debt from the king, he instantly grabs the man and begins to choke him. He's choking this man and abusing this person. And he's yelling in his face, pay me back what you owe me. You owe me. At this fellow servant then fell to his knees and begged the same thing that he begged the king. He said, please be patient with me. But the first servant, he didn't have any patience for him. He had no forgiveness. And he threw this man who owed him this debt into prison. Well, the master that had forgiven the servant heard about this. He heard about what he was doing to his fellow servant there, and the king calls him in. I can't even imagine that moment being the one. That's like going to the principal's office right there. Oh, you're being called in for what's going on here. And the king says to him, did I not forgive you of your debt? Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had on you? So in his anger, it says that the king handed him over to be tortured until he could pay back all that he owed. But then Jesus drops the warning. Here's the warning at the end. He says in this last verse in 35, this is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother and sister in your heart. So remember what I said about the Brothers Grimm tales? Like I said, they came with a lesson or a warning. Jesus here is giving us a warning. He's trying to teach us a lesson and say, this is not good for you to hold on to what these other people have done to you. God has forgiven us of our debt. Every sin that you have committed has cost you more than you can ever repay. But when we come to him, when we come to God and we plead with him and say, Lord, I am sorry, please forgive me, he does just that. How can any of us who know what it means to be forgiven ever beat down, to belittle, to hate, or harm someone who has wronged us? Or even further, how can we hold a grudge and not forgive them? We're told straight from Jesus' mouth, your God has forgiven you. You must forgive the little bit that others have done to you. The thing is, you know what? Whatever's happened in your life where people have hurt you, it may seem huge. It may have hurt you. It may have cost you what seems to be so much. But the thing is, if God can forgive you of all of your sins that you have committed, we need to be able to forgive each other of the transgressions that we've done to each other. This reminds me of a story that actually I heard on the news a couple of years ago. And there was a family that they were living in a city in a suburb, and they were just living their lives. And one night there was a break-in in their home. During the break-in, the teenage son had awoken because he heard some noises. And the intruder then became startled at seeing the teen that had come out of bed to see what was going on. And he actually shot the teen boy. So after he shot the son, the man ran away. The family called 911, but it was too late. By the time the paramedics had arrived, the son had died. The police were able to apprehend the intruder, and he was put on trial for everything that he had done. I cannot imagine the pain that this family was going through, having their teenage son killed by this man, ripped away from them at such a young age. Well, the family attended the trial of the man who had broken into their home and killed their son, and throughout the trial, the criminal did not show any remorse whatsoever for what he had done. Well, at one point in the trial, the judge asked, would the family like to say anything to the defendant for what he has done? And actually, the father had stood up and he had a speech prepared on a little piece of paper. And so he gets right up in front of the man. It's not that he was right against him, but he was on the stand there, and the man was sitting at his seat there. And the father looks at him in the eyes and says, it really has hurt us more than you could ever know to lose our son. But I want you to know one thing, and that is our family forgives you for what you've done. And he says to them then, and may you find peace in God. These people were followers of Christ. They were Christians. And they knew what God was calling them to do. And that was to forgive this man. At this, the man on trial began to break down into tears. It's because he had just been shown forgiveness for something that not once did he say he was sorry for. But the love that was shown by this family was the kind of love that God has asked us to show each other, because he has shown us that love. I can't even imagine how hard it must be to forgive somebody who has hurt you so much, that has taken so much from you. But God says, whatever someone else has done to you, you must forgive them, because I've forgiven you. This week, my challenge to you is to think about those who have hurt you. I know that this is not a fun thing to do. And most of the times, we really feel like, you know what? I don't really want to reopen those wounds. I don't want to look at that has happened. But I'm going to tell you now, it's time for you to heal those wounds for good. Think about someone who has hurt you, that you were still hurt by. I want you to have that person just in the back of your mind. Now I want you to think of all the things that you have done wrong against God. The sins, the hurt, the pain that we have caused God. Oh my goodness, my list is so long of all the things that I've done to pain him, to hurt him. Well, for those of you that claim Jesus as your Lord and Savior, God's forgiven you of all of that. Now you got to do as God did. Forgive that person or those people in your heart. No longer allow this pain to eat you up. Forgive them of the pain that they have caused you, and allow God to heal those wounds. I love what it says in 34, that in anger his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. When we do not forgive someone, the only person you're hurting is yourself. That person, it doesn't matter if they accept your forgiveness. It doesn't matter if they even know that you've forgiven them. Because all you're doing is holding on to this pain and this hurt that they've caused you. God is saying, I've forgiven you, forgive them. And then you can be healed. The thing is, stories are a powerful thing. As we wrap up these series, I want you to keep going through these stories that Jesus taught. There's so many more parables that we didn't even touch. But I want to give you the opportunity to dive into them. Go into Matthew. There are even a couple right here in Matthew 18 that we can talk about. but I want you to get in there and read it. I want you to see the truth for yourself and have God speak to you. I want you to use them to grow in your own life and then take these stories and help teach others, because that's the whole point of these stories. Let's go ahead and pray. God, thank you so much for this wonderful day. Thank you for the forgiveness that you give me. You forgive me of everything, and I could never repay you. No matter how many years that I work, no matter how many good things that I do, no matter how much I pray, no matter how much I serve, I cannot repay you the debt that I owe. So I thank you for forgiving it for me, for loving me even when I don't deserve it. I pray that I can take all of those that have hurt me in the past, and then I can just forgive them as well. And I know through forgiveness, we will be healed. Our hearts will be healed. Our minds will be healed. Because God, you've forgiven us. We need to forgive others. We thank you. In your name I pray. Amen. Thank you guys so much for joining me here this morning. We are going to be starting our new series next week, so I hope to see you guys then.